First off, I was asked to talk a little about scrounging materials to build your rigs or other portions of it, because that's some of what I do. Either for the cameras, I've made several cameras, and some of the parts are scrounged plastic from whatever things you might find. I have a source for some PVC plastic that's up over an inch thick that I can use to make various parts. By just cut it down to size and turn it on a lathe and make things like the winding knobs for my cameras or a few other things. Gosh, I scrounged the gears for the latest rig here, which has got two sets of worm gears in it, just to try it out. One for the rotational and one for the elevation. And those come out of VCRs, and VCRs are findable at garage sales or who knows where, just because people discard them, even in dumpsters. I don't know, people probably don't get away with it as much here as they do where I live, but in garbage dumpsters where I live, people throw their household trash in dumpsters, and as long as they don't have their name and address on anything, they can get away with it. And if you look around a little, you find a lot of those freebies. The aluminum that I made the walk-down pulleys out of came from a highway directional sign, basically, that had gotten destroyed in an avalanche in Juneau last February. It was one of these signs that's on a corner that is telling you that there's a corner there, and stuff had got completely ripped off the sign, torn in half, and I ripped that up on the table saw into strips, and then in the bandsaw into pieces of to make the rigs out of it. And I'll touch on basically a little on anodizing aluminum here, if I don't forget, which is part of the doing this. I don't know that I'll mention anything more on scrounging unless somebody, part of the scrounging is cheap cameras. I don't really like, I'm going to flit around like this, I'm afraid. The cameras I use are in 35 millimeter are mostly point and shoot pocket cameras that people have decided they don't want anymore because they're lower tech or whatever. They can be had at garage sales for $5 or $10 or something like that, which is essentially is cheaper than point and shoot or than disposable cameras are, and they have better optics generally. And most of them then have winders built in on them, and you have the ability to more than one photo at that. So that's some of what I come from there, and part of why I do scrounging like that, I kind of become disgusted with the disposable society we live in, and I try to recycle things in my fashion the way I can, with some frequency. It's not that I don't throw things away too, but my wife kind of wonders why I keep some of the things I do, so Brooks has seen my garage, so he knows what that's about. He was in Juneau a couple of times here and over the past few years. So anyway, okay, that's enough of that, I guess. Reasons for making cameras. I wound up, a friend of mine that I developed because of kite aerial photography had seen some of my photos, and he's a professional photographer that uses large format cameras. He's a panoramic photographer. He uses circuit cameras. If you know what that is, it's a 360-degree rotational camera on a larger scale, however, than what Michel Desarrier showed Friday evening, I guess it was. Their contact prints come from that, so they're very large negatives. They're like his largest that he uses right now is a 10-inch circuit camera. It's just 10 inches high and however long the negative is, and he makes contact prints from that. would have been nice to have that for this photo this afternoon. It would have made it easy to get everybody and everything they wanted in the picture. Anyway, when I got involved where he was concerned, I'd already tried 120 cameras, garage sale style, which is relatively cheap ones, and with mixed success, you know, and didn't do it a lot, and most of those are all one shot at a time timers with that, rather than RC. I got to collect my thoughts here again. He had said to me that rather than buying an expensive camera, which is one of the things I was pursuing the thought of doing, of buying like a $3,000 120 camera to put up in a Kite, and I don't know if I want to do that, not to mention the fact they weigh quite a bit, most of them. He says, put your money in a good lens, and which is what I did. I got a couple of fairly decent lenses, and make your own camera. Camera's pretty simple, actually. It's just a light, tight box that holds the film, and you don't even really need a lens if you've ever heard of a pinhole camera. Although for KAP, I don't think you'd want to do a pinhole. There we go again. The lenses I got, the best lenses I've got are a couple of Super Angulon made by Schneider in Germany, and that's 65 millimeter on one, and I just acquired a 47 millimeter lens. And when you're making larger format photos, you need to keep one thing in mind, that camera motion becomes more of an issue, because the distance the lens is away from the film means that camera motion is going to be causing more blurred images, so your rig has to be much more stable. I had to go to RC for that, because one-shot timer loftings didn't net very good pictures. Then you could watch the rig and tell when everything's steady enough to take a photo, and that improved that dramatically. And so anyway, I've made a 617 camera, which shoots 3 frames of 120 film per exposure. That's 4 shots for a roll of film. And then I made the 612 camera, which I have here. And if anybody of you saw the photo of the ferry that was in Japan Kite Aerial Photography Contest, and a few other places it's been. It actually got printed in a Alaskan Southeastern magazine. They offered me some money to print it in there, so I took it. But anyway, that was taken with that 612 camera. The camera I'm currently using, or I shouldn't say currently using, I'm currently getting ready to use, is 6:9 format, and that's, I should mention that as far as these formats are concerned, it's 2 1/4 by about 7 1/4 on the 617. 6:9 is 2 1/4 by about 3 1/2, and 612 is 2 1/4 by 4 1/2. This is in inches, just so you know what that's
so the
getting.
numbers are centimeters.
In centimeters, the 617, 6:9, 612, yeah. So that gives you an idea of the size of negative you got. Now, the idea in a larger negative, then, if you get a really good image, it means you can make a much larger print and still have good information for a very large enlargement. If, like most of the things that we're doing, we aren't necessarily trying to make posters and things. If you want to make a poster or something that big, a larger format camera becomes a worthwhile tool. My drawback, of course, is I still have to haul it down and wind the film and cock the shutter for each exposure. That means, and not to mention setting the shutter speed and the aperture for whatever I'm doing, and that's been guesstimation, so my images are some underexposed, some not too many overexposed. I tend to err on the wrong side of things a little bit. But anyway, I guess that pretty well talks about it. One of the reasons for making my own not only is just to have a cheaper camera, but it does cut down a lot on weight. The 6.9 camera that I have made there now has not been lofted with a Kite yet. It weighs about 8 ounces less than a Graflex XL does, which uses that same lens and some of the other configuration. I made a wooden body for it, and that cut down a lot of weight and cut down the expense of that, even though you can't buy those new anymore. They're an old camera. I guess my last little thing I'm going to talk about here then is I tend to use portrait format a great deal. I just kind of like portrait format from looking from above, because I can get, with the right lens, I can get an image that looks virtually straight down or real close to it and still sees the horizon in one picture, and I like that ability. Then I can crop out anything I don't want. The 120 negative, you've got lots to work with to crop your image, so it has some pros. Gee, I don't know. I guess I can just ask it. Anodizing aluminum. I was going to talk about that a little bit. I did put a paper back there that I downloaded off of a website where I got the best information from. You can't read the URL on it, however, the searching for his website by the guy's name, and that will net you that website. You can look at that paper. You can read what you want of what I have there. The advantage of the anodizing aluminum then is that when you're handling the aluminum, your hands don't get black. If it touches your kite line, it doesn't get the line black. If I anodize the ferrules for my large GoPro that some of you may have seen fly yesterday, and before I did that, I wound up leaving black spots on the kite, and then I anodized those ferrules that stopped that, which is kind of a nice thing to do. It's pretty easy for anybody to do that has a little willingness, I guess, to put up with a little of the things that are involved, which is cleaning the aluminum really well and being cautious enough with the chemicals, because you're using battery acid and a battery charger to as part of the anodizing process, and it gives off a gas that you don't really want to breathe. So ideally it should be outside. And then the problem, and he mentions on these pages, is that keeping the temperature of your anodizing solution from getting too warm. If it gets too warm, it kind of pits out the aluminum more than beyond what anodizing is supposed to be. Gosh, I didn't practice this. I don't know, I guess effectively, if anybody has any additional questions about this, they can ask me either now or later, and oops, there's a hand.
Does the anodizing process also strengthen the aluminum, kind of temper it?
I don't know that it tempers it in the sense that it'll have the more or less likely to bend or break. It hardens the surface a little bit. This is not quite hard coat anodizing in the sense that you might send it out to a company that does anodizing. They use a little different chemicals and a lower temperature solution, and it's that anodizing layer is thicker than what you can do with this method. But this method produces fine results for use for your own purposes, and the price is better. So it only hardens the surface of the aluminum, and it's in microns how deep it goes, and some of that's dependent on how long you're in the anodizing bath and what the temperature of that solution is. All of those things come into play, and the number of pieces you have in there will drive the heat of the anodizing bath up faster. You have to have a means of cooling that, and I don't have a problem where I live a fair amount of the year because with it outside, it doesn't allow it to heat up very much. In the summer, it's still an issue, and I used a large plastic tub to put my anodizing tank in and put water in that enough that it wouldn't quite float the anodizing tank, and then put basically what amounts to ice cubes in it, big ice cubes, however, blocks of ice, to help keep the water temperature down around it. And you have to kind of stir the water a little bit to help that. But it's very easy to do. It's if you, pardon me?
How many different colors can you get?
Whatever you want to go and buy. RIT dye works wonderfully. He recommends using only because the company at Caswell sells him or gives him the dye at a very reduced rate because he puts a plug in his website. But I read from other websites that RIT dye works very well, and I can say that yes, it does. So
you could have a multicolored red.
if you want to do sectional dippings of it, you could, yeah. It's,
I'm sorry.
pardon me?
No, okay, I didn't want to cut you off there.
I don't know where I was going anyway. I'm lost most of the time.
The basic process is that you hook up your pieces, you have to electrically hook up your...
Yeah, you hook them up to, you clean the part really clean. You get some, like at Radio Shack, you can, or other places, you can get aluminum wire that's meant for antennas, essentially, for somebody's radio or something. It's a long coil of wire, and you can stretch that out for antenna use or other things. Anyway, you use that wire and cut off short pieces of it, and you have to wedge it tightly into a hole in your project that you're anodizing. And a good tight fit will allow it to anodize well. And like I say, reading that, you should read that if you're interested in it enough to do it. I don't want to cover it too far here because I have a limited amount of time. And the website, if you have PCs, will get you, or internet service will get you to that. If you're interested enough, I'll write a few notes. I brought a bunch of CDs, and I have some pictures that I took of my anodizing process without the water tank that I surround it with, because I didn't need it when I took the pictures. But I can give anybody a CD with a little bit of my comments concerning what I know about it, and you could add that to anything else. If anybody wants a CD, I'll make them tonight, whenever. So, other than that, if you can ask questions of me, or I'll go sit down.
Do I see that right, that on your rig, the top part is nylon?
Yes, I know. I noticed on Chris Benton's pages there was a discussion about going about using nylon screws and stuff, and this is all I've used for most of that, and I started to make an aluminum screw to use in there, and I ran out of time. I got it partially done, but I can't finish it because I have to make a nut for it and all of that, and I was having difficulty threading it from both ends and leaving the middle bare because the aluminum was sliding, and I didn't want to score it too much. I've never had a problem with a 3/8 inch aluminum or 3/8 inch nylon screw. However, I noticed when this camera's been on a PAP rig that I use on a handheld one. If you know what PAP is, it's pole aerial photography. It's a little bit. I don't want to shake it too much when I'm tipping it up because obviously the weight of the camera could be an issue then. And I tighten up some of the other parts a little bit more when I do that, so I don't need to risk it breaking off quite as much down here. That's the only point I was concerned about, that it might break, is when I've got complete side load on it there, because it's not really a light rig. It's lighter than it would have been had it been other, the regular camera body.
But you should be careful, because there's different types of
Yes.
nylon,
Yes.
and it also depends on how the thread was made.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get, a creep fracture
Mm-hmm.
goes on, and then all of a sudden it
Yes,
breaks.
I've dealt with nylon a lot in that respect.
And also there's some nylons that degrade very rapidly
Mhm.
with sinking temperatures.
Yep.
Become very
No,
brittle.
yes, I know
I
that
would really-
cold,
For such a nice piece of equipment,
yeah.
I would be against anything nylon without those.
Yeah, I noticed that discussion, and I was hoping to have that replaced before I came here, but I couldn't get it done. Because I knew I was going to get some input on that, and I was trying to thwart that.
I know what I'm talking about, not from KAP, but we have to install a false deck which hang off nylon bolts.
Mhm.
And we had one fail, and we didn't really understand, because it guaranteed it and so on and
Mhm.
so forth. And then it happens such that they missed something like, at the end of the project, something like 5 bolts.
Mm-hmm.
So they went out in a shop and bought some other ones.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of those 5 that failed. So there's probably structurally sound.
Mm-hmm.
You
Well-
have to be a specialist to know which one.
Yeah, well, some of it also, a lot of people tend to over-torque nylon trying to have it tight. That's bad. If you over-torque it, then you're putting it to additional risk. Where I worked before I retired, they have it was on a ship, a sewage treatment plant on a ship, and this has effectively, it has a bunch of it's a box that everything passes through, and it has a bunch of plates that are made out of metal. They're titanium plates. On the bulk of it, there's another metal in one part of it, and the anode is one end and the cathode is the other end on this. And everything passes through there, and the current flashes over between these plates to create, in salt water, it basically makes chlorine. Those plates are held on with nylon screws because you can't have any metal inside of there that may make a contact with those plates and bridge between them. If those nylon screws shear, which happens occasionally because some of this work that they put that to, they have to do something every few hours that kind of cleans everything in there, and it's a temporary clean kind of a thing, but the whole case of this thing bulges considerably when it does, like inches, and it's not a really big piece of nylon. They break them periodically. That was the case is made out of PVC, and that's the source of my PVC, is those cases when they break. But the plates that are in between are held into those cases with nylon screws, and those nylon screws will occasionally shear from the force of all of that. And it's considerable force, and it's interesting to see how much force there is, but most of the time it's somebody has over-torqued them putting them in.
Do those plates, they are titanium, do they never fail?
Well, that's the thing. If these screws shear, if you get a couple of screws shear on here, then that plate gets loose in the flow, and it makes contact with another plate, and then you burn the edges off of it, or the whole thing blows up. Basically, it doesn't literally explode, but that's what destroys this whole unit, and then you have to replace it. It's a considerable job, but nonetheless, that's That's what
Why
happened.
don't you have titanium cameras then, if you have
Well,
recuperated some of that?
I've been wanting to do something with titanium at some point. I haven't tried to do that. Bending titanium is not going to be something you can do. You're going to have to find another means of joining titanium. I do want to try that at some point, but not yet. So,
Yeah, I heard from a fellow at Boeing that titanium, he says it tool hardens.
mhm,
Cutting it and it gets hot, it actually hardens, so
mhm.
they use they use exotic.
Plasma cutter probably.
Yeah, they use exotic methods.
Yeah. I'd like to have a plasma cutter.
Water jets, plasma cutters.
Yeah,
I mean,
Cobalt drills too.
yeah.
Is titanium less dense than aluminum? No, it's a dumb question.
I couldn't tell you chemically how it's constituted. It's stronger essentially, but it's stiffer. Given thickness of titanium is thicker or stiffer than aluminum at the same thickness. So
So this is all homemade,
it's made out of scrounged aluminum.
no, the camera.
The camera. It's a wooden body, and the back I got from eBay.
Oh, okay.
And this front part here allows me to focus the lens on it, which I got that from eBay, because without that I couldn't focus the lens. And I wanted to make it possible to where I could use this camera as something other than just KAP.
Yeah.
Because I figured initially I would have just mounted it right to the camera, find out the correct distance and mount it right to the camera, but might as well make it versatile enough to be able to use it for other things. So
And how do you wind the film?
it has, I don't wind this by radio yet. I got this back I got has an actual knob,
Yeah.
so I don't have film in it right now. It has a knob on it that I could affix a gear to and wind it that way, and that was the reason why I got this one. The newer backs of this type have a lever wind that one pull on the lever winds the film the right distance.
It's awfully nice for people with thumbs available.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I have to do that, and then I have to either get a self-cocking shutter for the camera, or for the lens, or I have to come up with a means of cocking the shutter for each shot also. So I have several things to think about on that. It's a work in process. So I think I've used up more than enough time. I better let somebody else have the floor.